Good day and welcome to the British Report. Imagine, if you will, that you have just spent years fighting for the keys to your own house, only for the new lodger to hand a spare set to the neighbours across the road and pay them for the privilege of telling you when to mow your lawn. That is precisely what is happening in the corridors of Westminster right now. We are witnessing a political heist so brazen it would make a highwayman blush. Just minutes ago, the details of Sir Keir Starmer's EU reset bill have leaked, and let me tell you, it is not just a policy shift, it is a total white flag surrender of British sovereignty. The Prime Minister is reportedly preparing to sign away our right to make our own laws in exchange for access that we were told we already had. It is the ultimate Brexit betrayal, and the fury erupting across the country is so loud you can probably hear it in Brussels. Quick favour, if you are loving this, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers haven't yet. It is free, takes a second and means the world to us. Thanks if you did. Now back to the show. The headlines today are absolutely radioactive. Sir Keir Starmer is facing fresh fury over a clandestine plot to hand the European Union sweeping new powers that would allow Brussels to alter United Kingdom law at the stroke of a pen. This isn't just a reset of relations, it is a full-blown reshackling. It has been revealed that the Prime Minister has ordered his ministers to prepare new legislation, conveniently dubbed the Brexit Bill by critics, which is set to be tabled in Parliament this spring. This bill is the crown jewel of Starmer's plan to unpick the 2016 referendum result, bit by painful bit. Under the guise of economic growth, the government is preparing to allow the EU to dictate our food standards, our animal welfare rules, and even our pesticide use. For the first time since we actually left the bloc, members of Parliament are being asked to voluntarily surrender their sovereign right to make laws for the British people.
He can possibly endorse at the same time. So he's left, as Darren Jones did on your programme, with just simply explaining to you what has happened in the last 24 hours. It's something unique to politicians. Would you like a cup of tea? Well, in the last 24 hours, of course, you've offered me a cup of tea.
Yes, but I'm not really in a position to say whether or not I want a cup of tea.
The important thing, Camilla, is that tea is being drunk. Let's focus on the future in which tea will be drunk. But would you like one?
Just to qualify this is when I asked Darren Jones whether he supported what Donald Trump had done. And I then got a running commentary of what Donald Trump had done in Venezuela, rather than any commitment from him as an individual cabinet minister or the Prime Minister or a representative of the Labour government as to whether or not we supported this mission. And let's be honest, the imagery of it was extraordinary. There were shades of tyrant in his pants, you know, Saddam Hussein being toppled, to see Maduro in that extraordinary garb where he basically looked like my son playing on a VR with the sort of blindfold that resembled a pair of 1980s sunglasses, ear mufflers on, presumably to stop him and his wife from finding out where they were being escorted to by the US military. But
I watched it thinking, could Trump do Britain next?
Well, he set his
and I'm sure, given that it is apparently a coup perhaps co-organised by the Vice President of Venezuela, one wonders if Angela Rayner might put a telephone call into the White House and say he'll be in his garden on Tuesday.
It is like being told you can join a club, but you have to pay the full membership fee, follow all the club rules, and yet you aren't allowed to vote in the committee meetings. Sir Keir Starmer is pushing for these closer ties under immense pressure from Europhile Labour MPs who seem to have forgotten that the United Kingdom is a sovereign nation. They argue it will boost the economy, but at what cost? When you have to pay hundreds of millions just to be told what to do, that isn't an investment. It is an annual subscription to your own obsolescence. The mechanism for this betrayal is a concept known as dynamic alignment. Now, in the world of political spin, that sounds quite modern and sleek, perhaps something you'd find on a high-end sports car. In reality, it is the political equivalent of being on a lead. Under dynamic alignment, the United Kingdom would be expected to automatically comply with regulations passed in Brussels. If a bureaucrat in Belgium decides that a certain pesticide is banned or a food standard must change, Britain must follow suit. The kicker? Unlike when we were members, the British government will have absolutely zero vote on these future laws. We will be rule takers in the purest sense. It is the first time since Brexit that our MPs are being asked to give up the very thing that 17.4 million people voted for, the power to decide our own destiny. Reform UK's Richard Tice has already lashed out, calling this a blatant effort by Starmer's Remainers to overturn the democratic will of the people. He isn't wrong. They want Britain back under the thumb of EU rules, taxes and costs, and they are hoping you won't notice until the ink is dry on the bill. While the suits in Whitehall talk about easing trade, the people actually producing our food are smelling something quite different, and it isn't fresh country air. Take Richard Wheeler, a 55-year-old dairy farmer from Worcestershire. He runs a 200-acre farm and he is absolutely livid. He says that while farmers are happy to deal with a bit of paperwork to maintain their high British standards, this new bill is a precursor for allowing more food into the country that is of a lower quality.
Side, if you don't have people pushing for you, like I doubt that within the Foreign Office there are a lot of people pushing for freedom for Venezuela, right? There are a lot of people pushing for regime change in Iran. If you don't have that, then you're not going to get the outcome that you might want.
Yes.
Another really good piece that was written over the winter was by Aaron Bastani, who has been on this show, the Marxist, who wrote a superb takedown of what's going to be a major issue this year for Keir Starmer, which is the English local government reform.
Yes.
Which has resulted in some cases in historic municipalities being joined together who have nothing in common, Portsmouth and Southampton. It's resulted in very expensive bureaucratic refits, and it's also meant that elections have been cancelled, which is going to be a sort of democratic crisis. People are going to notice this when it finally creeps up on them. And he points out in this piece that the whole idea was dreamt up by PricewaterhouseCoopers. That it was a private company was asked for its advice. Stakeholders, state people took it on. And then having taken it on, to be fair to PwC, it laid out how you could do this in such a way as to save money. But partly because of pressure, they didn't want to amalgamate certain places, they have lowered the threshold for how many people should be in these new bodies. And the result is they might not even get the savings they want. And Bastani sums this up really well. He says it distills so much about our political class. You identify a genuine existing problem, the expensive nature of local government, adopt a technocratic blueprint devised by consultants, implement the whole thing with maximum incompetence. Yes. And so what is Starmer hoping is going to happen this year? He's hoping that all of the horrible things his Chancellor have done to us over the last 18 months are going to finally pay off. The wind turbines are finally going to somehow result in the lowering of energy prices, that all things are going to stabilize and we're going to start to feel the benefits. He doesn't seem to realize that not only has he piled on the damage, but he is not the man to reform the stakeholder state, because he's one of the stakeholders.
Yes. Richard's point is vital. Why should we align with EU pesticide regulations if it means our own farmers are hamstrung while we import products that don't meet our criteria? He calls it Starmer's next trick of incompetence. The Prime Minister is using the excuse that Brexit isn't working to drag us back into the EU's orbit with no mandate from the electorate and no seat at the table. It is a total capitulation that treats British businesses like pawns in a geopolitical game of chess, where Starmer has already lost his queen. If you needed any more proof that the government has lost its fiscal senses, look no further than the Erasmus student exchange programme. Before Christmas, the government quietly announced it is paying £570 million to rejoin the scheme. To put that in perspective, that is double what Boris Johnson rejected as too expensive in 2021. This sum represents a fifth of the entire EU funding envelope for Erasmus+. And here is the truly worrying part. Brussels has already hinted that the 30% discount they gave us won't be repeated. In the future, the cost could skyrocket to £810 million a year. For what? So a small percentage of students can go on exchange. Meanwhile, the government is expanding the scheme to include students from Turkey by 2027. With plans to bring in Egypt, Algeria and Morocco. While British pensioners are being told to tighten their belts, the government is writing blank cheques to Brussels for a scheme that primarily benefits a tiny elite and international students. Sir Keir Starmer has spent a lot of time telling the BBC and anyone who will listen that rejoining the customs union or the single market are red lines. He told Laura Quensberg that he has already taken the sovereign decision to align more closely. But wait a minute, if you align with all the rules of the single market and you pay into the budget of the single market, haven't you effectively rejoined the single market in everything but name? It is like a vegetarian claiming they don't eat meat while tucking into a massive steak because they've decided to call it a high-protein vegetable. The Prime Minister says he wants to go further in his European reset, but he is doing it without a seat at the table. We are becoming the waiter of Europe. We bring the money, we serve the rules, and we don't get to eat the dinner.
When the final on Saturday, which saw Luke Littler win for a second time the World Championship, was dominated by, I'm not going to repeat the chants about Keir Starmer, but they weren't pretty. And I think the Ali Pali crowd basically sums up the sentiment of most people in Britain,
yes.
which is that when the Prime Minister speaks, the public looks and sees a deluded man on his last legs,
yes,
spouting, self-congratulatory nonsense.
Yes, I'm afraid he hangs over this country like a dark cloud. And
He
that
does.
same way in every new year, you want to start with clean teeth like your cat.
Yes.
Or you want to start with the decorations put away and the house all tidy. And then you realise, I've still got to take that delayed train into work. I'm still living with this person I hate.
I know, but
and it's the
also
same
not-
with the Prime Minister. You think, and I've still got Keir Starmer as Prime Minister.
Yeah, I know.
I can't move on with my life because Keir Starmer is running my country.
Yes.
A Labour source actually had the audacity to say that free traders and Conservatives have always wrestled with this concept. No, Sir Keir, what we wrestle with is a Prime Minister who thinks that sovereignty is something you can trade away for a pat on the head from Ursula von der Leyen. This Brexit bill is not just another piece of legislation, it is a fundamental breach of trust. When 17.4 million people voted to leave the EU, they didn't vote for dynamic alignment or to pay hundreds of millions of pounds for the privilege of being told what to do. They voted for a parliament that is accountable to them, not to a boardroom in Brussels. Starmer is attempting to reverse Brexit by stealth, using vague, sweeping ministerial powers to change our relationship with Europe without a proper public debate. The sheer arrogance of suggesting that ideology shouldn't get in the way of surrendering our laws is breathtaking. The ideology in question is democracy. If the Prime Minister cannot or will not defend the sovereign independence of the United Kingdom, then he has no business leading it. As the opposition prepares to fight this bill in the spring, the question remains, how much of Britain is Sir Keir Starmer willing to sell before the British people decide they've had enough? This is a betrayal of the highest order, and it is happening right now under our very noses. The fallout from this leak is already causing tremors within the Labour Party. Backbenchers in red wall seats are looking at their constituents, people who voted for Brexit, to see change in their communities, and they are terrified. They know that if they walk into the division lobbies to vote for dynamic alignment, they are essentially signing their own political death warrants. The Prime Minister is acting as if he has a massive mandate for integration, but the 2024 election was won on a promise of change, not a promise of Brussels. By unpicking the stitches of the Brexit deal, he is opening a wound that many thought had finally begun to heal. Furthermore, the pay-to-play aspect of this deal is an insult to every taxpayer currently struggling with the cost of living. We are being told there is no money for essential services, yet the Treasury can suddenly find hundreds of millions for Erasmus and single market access fees. It is a question of priorities, and Sir Keir's priorities seem to lie anywhere but with the British public. He is prioritising the feelings of the Europhile elite over the facts of the British economy. The reset is nothing more than a slow-motion surrender. As the spring approaches and this bill hits the floor of the House of Commons, the resistance will be fierce. Conservatives, Reform UK, and even some principled Labour MPs will have to decide where their loyalties lie. Do they stand with the voters who demanded to take back control, or do they stand with the Prime Minister who is handing that control back on a silver platter? The sovereign decision Starmer talks about wasn't his to make alone. It belongs to the people. And if he continues to ignore that, the call for his resignation will only grow louder. Britain is not for sale, but Sir Keir Starmer is acting like the ultimate liquidator. Every single clause of this proposed legislation needs to be scrutinised under the harshest light. If we allow dynamic alignment to take root in our food standards, how long before it moves to our labour laws, our environmental targets and our tax codes? This is the thin end of the wedge that we were warned about. Starmer is counting on the public being too tired or too distracted to notice the details, but the details are where the betrayal lives. It is time for the Prime Minister to be honest with the British people. Is he leading a sovereign nation, or is he managing a branch office of the European Commission? If it is the latter, he must go. The British people deserve a leader who views our independence as an asset to be leveraged, not a problem to be solved. We need someone who will champion British standards, protect British farmers, and spend British taxes on British priorities. Sir Keir Starmer has shown his hand, and it is a handful of concessions and surrenders. The EU reset is a failure before it has even begun, and the only reset the country truly needs is at the very top of the government. Thanks for watching the British Report.